Right, on to this now. It's a tough balancing act, the need to save lives versus the need to keep the economy running. Now, the lockdown in the United States has seen a record 16.9 million people left jobless. South Africa, with its high unemployment rate, simply cannot afford to lose more jobs. So, to borrow from US President Donald Trump, is the cure worse than the problem? To discuss this, I'm joined by two economists. We are joined by Dawie Roodt. He is with the Efficient Group, and independent economist Thabi Leoka. A very good morning to the both of you. Firstly, I'm going to start with you, Dawie. Should government relax the lockdown regulations in order to allow for economic activity?
Good morning to you. I think what is important for us to understand, and at least we should open this debate, is that poverty also kills. In fact, poverty is the biggest killer in the world. You can put all nasties together, you can put all illnesses together, and poverty will still kill more people than all the other ones put together. So we must understand that. Not necessarily by way of people dying of hunger. That's not necessarily what I mean. But you can simply look at the life expectancy of South Africans, currently around about 60 years, and Europeans around about 80 years. So we actually died 20 years before the time, primarily because of poverty. So we have to understand that poverty is a killer as well. I've done some calculations, and in a really bad case scenario, if everybody gets this virus in South Africa, probably say 500,000 people or so will die in year one. If, however, we keep this lockdown, the economy is going to contract by 10%, and based on certain numbers, and I can give you those numbers, but based on certain numbers, we're probably going to see deaths of around about 30,000 or so per year for the next, say, 10 years, killing, say, 300,000 people over the next 10 years because of poverty. On top of that, you have to add the people that are going to die because of the hunger as well. So my answer to that is that we have to at least allow this economy to go on as much as we possibly can, because poverty also kills.
Thabi Leoka, let's bring you into the conversation. Similar question to you. The predictions out there are that the unemployment rate will jump to 50% from the near 30% we're currently at. Should government relax the regulations?
Thanks for the question. I don't think government should relax any of the COVID-19 lockdown because they did it for a reason, and it's not something that I think economists can make a decision on, or anyone but the medical specialists. And so I know that the government is relying on these medical specialists to guide us. I do agree with Dawie that it is a cost to the economy, and there is a risk that the unemployment rate will increase, and there is a risk that the poverty rate will increase. There's also a risk that the inequality rate will increase. But at the same time, we don't want to add to that problem and add deaths caused by an unknown virus called COVID-19. So I think that this is the best that can be done. I think when we come out of this, we'll actually appreciate that the lives were saved because we went into lockdown for as long as possible. I do know that there are sectors that are operating, so it's not like that, there's a complete lockdown. And there will be, I think the government is looking at which sectors can be allowed to operate, but it all depends on what the epidemiologists and virologists and medical specialists are saying.
Dawie, let's bring you back in. So Thabi Leoka says it's not as though economic activity is not taking place, which brings me to the question to you. Right now, how would you define South Africa's lockdown? Is it a generalized lockdown, or is it a smart lockdown, which is what I think Thabi is gravitating towards?
Yes, I agree if we try to do a so-called smart lockdown, but I think the emphasis must be on as much economic activity allowed as absolutely possible. Yes, there's some parts of the economy still working. I've done some calculations for my estimates on economic growth, and at the moment I have an economic contraction of around about 7% for the year. I would like to know what she thinks. I can also tell you that based on these sort of assumptions or these estimates, that the South African economy is likely to lose more than 1 million jobs. It could be more. more. Some economists are even talking about nearly 2 million jobs that could be lost during this year if we see economic growth contract by, say, 7% or so. So we will see a huge number of people that are going to lose their jobs. Additionally, what I understand about the virus is that we want to so-called flatten the curve. Now, my understanding of that is it means that a lot of people will still get it, but over an extended period of time. And that is exactly what we want to achieve, so that we do not overwhelm the medical facilities that we have in the short term. So we're still going to get it. It's just going to take us some time. And if this is your approach, and I agree, I'm not a virologist, I'm not a medical expert, but purely from a numbers point of view, is that if we want to flatten the curve, if everybody's going to get it in any way, then we should try to open the economy under certain kind of conditions. Like, for example, look at the vulnerable. Isolate as far as possible the elderly and people with underlying conditions, but allow young people to work as much as we possibly can, of course, under certain conditions.
Thabi Leoka, let's bring you back in. Dawie Roodt is saying that his predictions are that economic contraction is going to be a huge one. What are your predictions in as far as the growth or the lack thereof of this economy? Add to that question, Thabi, the suggestions or the argument right now that globally generalized lockdowns are transitioning into what Dawie and I are calling the smart lockdown. Why shouldn't South Africa take that route?
So I do agree that we will have a contraction, a deep contraction, and because of the extension to the end of April, I see GDP actually contracting to -8. So Dawie is right, between -7% to -8%. I also see that debt to GDP also widen significantly. I expect debt as a percentage as a percentage of GDP to widen to about possibly -12%. And so these are terrible numbers. I mean, the deficit to -12% and the debt to GDP to possibly 80% next year. So these are very, very bleak numbers. But at the same time, we are in a very, very unique situation, far worse than the global financial crisis, where we did lose just over 1 million jobs. I think the difference here, there's a little bit of a difference, and we need to appreciate that we are working as a country to ensure that the very poor and vulnerable are cushioned. And so we are providing certain cushions and providing finances and support for those who are poor, vulnerable, and those in the small and medium-sized enterprise sectors. And we are doing so that they can not lay off, and also we're paying people to stay at home, whereas at the global financial crisis, it was the opposite. You stimulated the economy, you paid people, and you stimulated the economy so that they can go back to work and further stimulate the economy. So this time is totally different. I think, only time will tell. So we can't, I'm very wary of opening up too quickly. I also know that we are an immunocompromised country, and the medical specialists have said that around 2.2 million South Africans have HIV, are HIV positive, and are not taking any antiretrovirals. So we have a huge young vulnerable population. So it's not about just allowing the young to work. It is our young are also immunocompromised, and we need to be aware of that. We also have in the US, we've seen a lot of young people also dying, from newborn babies to children who are 1 year old to all the way to older people. So again, you can't, are we saying that we're going to choose certain people to live and allow certain people to work? And even if you allow those to work, what guarantees you that they will not be infected at any stage, and they're further infecting others? So there are a lot of unknowns here, and I think that it's very dangerous to open the economy without considering all of these. And I'm sure that the epidemiologists and the virologists are looking into this and are advising the president and his team wisely about opening and when to open.
All right, Thabi Leoka. My final question to you, Dawie Roodt. Sectors of the economy that should be allowed to operate, in particular the ones that you suggest could absorb as many young people as is possible, but the risk, though, being that what will the infection rate be should we relax these regulations a little too much?
Yeah, just before I answer the question, I just want to say that South Africa is in a very difficult situation. We were in crisis actually before this crisis. So this is a crisis on top of a crisis. Many other countries can deal with this differently because they have more money. We ran out of money because of this mismanagement of especially the fiscal accounts previously. But some of the sectors that will obviously get through this relatively unscathed are the sectors in which you and I are working. Typically the kind of sectors where you can do your work on your cell phone or you can do it on your computer. That's typically in the service industry and the financial industry. But we need the secondary industries to do much better because that is potentially where we can create a lot of jobs. Unfortunately, that means putting a lot of people in factories, and that is potentially where the virus can spread as well. So I'm very sorry to say, is that the kind of industries where we can potentially create jobs are also the kind of industries where people are in physical contact with one another, and that is likely to lead to a further spread of this virus if you want to completely try to isolate the potential threat of people because of the potential threat of the virus.
Economists Dawie, Roodt and Thabi Leoka, I thank you both for your time and very grim predictions there in as far as the country's economic contraction this year is estimated to be.